The night the ocean took my husband, the harbor looked like hammered lead. I remember the color because I stood there too long trying to name it like naming it could change anything. Naomi Park called it an accident. Weather turned, she said, even though the Coast Guard report used a softer word, unfavorable. Like the ocean merely declined to cooperate and Ethan, being who he was, insisted it did. Ethan had one rule. People say that at funerals about love and marriage and trust, but his was simple and sharp enough to cut. Never go into the house on Hickory Isle. He didn't say please. He didn't offer a reason. He made it sound like the rule was about love, that keeping me away kept me safe or kept us whole. I accepted it because you can accept anything if you believe the person who asks would bleed for you. Besides, he never lied to me. Or I believed he never lied to me. Which is almost the same thing until it isn't. After the funeral, his lawyer pressed a cream envelope into my hand, the kind with a pleasing tooth under your thumb. I waited until the mourners were gone and the casserole brigade had retreated. I cut the flap with the same little silver knife I used to open art shipments at the gallery, and a brass key slid out, heavy enough to dent the wood. It had no tag, but I recognized the oval head and the petite teeth. The twins of that key lived on the ring Ethan always kept in a shallow bowl by the door, except this one had a notch like a crescent moon near the base. On the paper, his handwriting, steady, precise, said only, "My love, I'm sorry for the rule. If you ever need what's inside, you'll know. E." The handwriting punched a small hole in the middle of me. I had the sudden ridiculous thought that if I called his phone, he would answer. And when he didn't, I put the phone face down like it had betrayed me. By dusk a nor'easter crawled down from Camden, dragging a slick fog behind it. I told myself I was only going to the causeway to look. Hickory Isle sits so near the mainland that at low tide a narrow sandbar shows itself like a pale shoulder. A post warns tourists not to try it. The tide on our coast hunts quietly and fast. Ethan knew the tides by heart. He timed everything to them. Lumber drop-offs at the marina, weekend trips, dinners that turned to late-night blueprints. He called it the rhythm. He said you can live well if you obey what water wants. I parked at the pull-off just where the pines thin and the inlet opens to a long breath of gray. The wind tried to pry the door from my hand. I could hear the ocean grinding itself down to pebbles. I could also hear Ethan's voice in that tone he used when he pretended a decision belonged to me but had already decided. "Mara, don't go into that house." I went. The sand was wet sugar under my boots. Halfway across I looked back to make sure my car's taillights still glowed like two patient eyes. The sky leaned a little closer. On the far side, the island rose with its shoulder of scrub and rock and those stubborn black pines that always look like they know something you don't. The house hid on the lee side, out of the gale. Ethan had sighted it there himself, he said, because he liked to watch storms go by without being in them. Not because he was hiding something. You don't notice how many lies are in a life until you walk backward through them. At the edge of the trail the wind died like someone turning a dimmer. The island air smelled resinous and clean. Wet wood and salt. For a moment I let myself imagine I was walking toward our cottage, toward Ethan and the way he would lift the corner of the curtain when he heard me, grinning like a boy who'd been forgiven for something. Then the house came into view and broke the day in half. From the outside it was ordinary. A cedar-shingled saltbox, the kind printed on postcards for tourists who like their New England quaint and unthreatening. Ethan had put in hurricane shutters that folded back into neat pockets and stainless hinges that wouldn't pit in the brine. There was a small porch with a bench. The bench had a plaid blanket on it, just as if someone had left 5 minutes ago. For a moment the wildest hope came up in my throat, that I would open the door and find him toggling a breaker, sheepish, alive. I palmed the brass key to ground myself. It was cold and real and didn't care about my hope. The lock turned like it had been waiting for me. The door swung in on well-oiled hinges. I stepped into a room I knew. And didn't. It was our living room. Not the way interior designers say are when they stage a house. It was ours, the green couch with the faint bleach stain from where I ruined Ethan's t-shirt with a clumsy at-home tie-dye. The leaning stack of architectural record I kept meaning to recycle. The cheap ceramic bowl we bought at a flea in Providence that Ethan swore was mid-century modern, and I swore was junk with aspirations. Only everything was wrong by a degree. The couch sat 2 inches farther from the wall. The magazines were arranged by date like someone wanted them to be documentary evidence of us. The bowl had no spiderweb crack along the rim. My breath hiccuped. It was like walking into a perfect copy of a life that had been airbrushed. It made my skin crawl. "Ethan," I said because the room asked for it. The silence did a soft final thing. I crossed the room slowly, turned the lamp on the side table that should have had a chip near the base. The bulb bloomed warm. When I moved, something above my head clicked. Not loud, just a small cut of sound, metal on metal. I froze. I'd done discovery for years, even before I left litigation for the gentler commerce of gallery openings and donor brunches. I knew the sensation of being observed. I looked up and saw a dot in the crown molding that could have been a nail head, or a camera pinhole, or my grief playing tricks. "All right," I said, not to anyone. "All right." Down the hall the kitchen waited, white cabinets, the exact lemon bowl we owned, full and fresh, and a calendar pinned to the cork wall with the same brass tacks Ethan liked because they were satisfyingly overbuilt. The calendar showed June, the week of the accident, circled in pencil once, then again like a man in a trance. Upstairs, a door that should have led to Ethan's studio opened on a nursery. I didn't know my knees could buckle without drama. I grabbed the door frame and made myself look. A pale wood crib with a duvet the color of sea glass. A mobile of paper cranes. A rocking chair with a quilt I recognized. Not recognized, knew. It was my quilt. My foster mother had made it for me when I was 8. It had gone missing during one of our moves, and I had mourned it the way you mourn a small, irreplaceable country. I stepped into the room like entering a chapel and pressed my fingers to the quilt seams. It was real. It had the tiny puckered corner where a blue thread had always refused to lay flat. On the wall, a frame held a photo of a girl with 2 big barrettes and a gap tooth and a crooked grin aimed at a birthday cake with store-bought frosting. Me. My throat did something ungenerous and true. "Why?" I said aloud, and then a smaller word, "How?" Behind me, that click again, the faint kiss of a mechanism. I turned slowly. The nursery window looked out toward the mainland through the trees. A faint light shivered where my car must be. I crossed to the dresser and found a tiny brass keyhole in the back panel, too low for a child to reach. I used the key Ethan had sent because that is sometimes what love is, trying the most obvious door first. The panel slid aside soundlessly. Inside, a small monitor bloomed to life, the sort used for nanny cams or hunting blinds. It showed a hallway, this hallway, from the angle of the molding. Another pane showed the living room. A third showed a basement I hadn't found yet. I swallowed a curse so old-fashioned it would have made my foster mother proud. Ethan had built a house that watched itself. Or watched me. Or watched whoever came to watch me. "I'm going to hate you a little," I told the empty air, and hated myself for the relief that came with the anger. Anger was easier to carry than grief. It knew where to go. I went looking for the basement. The door was where it should have been, but behind a false pantry shelf. If you'd asked me the day before whether my husband knew how to build spy movies into woodwork, I would have laughed and said he couldn't hang a cabinet door without swearing. The shelf swung on invisible hinges. The stairwell smelled like a museum, dry, climate-controlled. A whisper of electricity. Concrete. Steel. A humming I recognized from server rooms at law firms. The room itself was small and exact. 2 counters, metal stools, racks of labeled banker's boxes in Ethan's thin, tidy print. A work light hung above a map of the coast. Red thread ran between pushpins, dock, clinic, foundation office, boathouse on a minor tributary. I traced one thread with my eyes and felt something like a truth pretending to be a theory. On the counter, a cheap Android phone with a cracked corner. It vibrated once when I touched it, woke to a lock screen that took the key code 0724. Our anniversary. The message app held a single unsent draft. To Naomi Park. The text read, "If I'm not back by dawn, open box 14 and call Vega. Dead man switches armed. Don't trust." The sentence ended mid-letter, as if Ethan's thumb had hovered over the keyboard and a hand had closed over his wrist. Box 14 sat on the second shelf. Of course it did. I lifted it down. The lid fit like it had been machined. Inside, ledgers. Spreadsheets printed on clean paper. A list of grants from Harrow Foundation, each with a handwritten note. Clinic supply, donor recruitment, quiet legal. I stared at the phrase donor recruitment until the words lost shape. Someone had annotated the list in a second-hand loop-year feminine. Not donors. Matches. A cold, practical thought arrived late. If this was real, I needed a picture of everything before anyone could burn it. I hadn't come prepared to raid my dead husband's secret vault. I set my phone to continuous shutter and worked methodically, pages, tabs, the map, the cracked Android screen, box 14 back in place, box 7 with a label that made my stomach turn, Ellis, original. My maiden name. I opened it even though part of me wanted to run. A photocopy of a sealed adoption file. A case note initialed Jr. June Rivera's initials in neat block letters from when she'd worked under a state grant searching for family reunification cases that could be closed. A grainy photo of my birth mother outside a clinic with a sign I had seen at a dozen charity balls, Harrow Wellness. A name that sounded like something that laid a cool hand on your brow and asked how you were sleeping. The note under the photo said, testified once, calcifies later, then gone. The monitor on the wall shifted. For a second I watched myself stooped over the box from a camera I hadn't noticed, and the nausea came with teeth. I didn't hear the motor first. I felt it. The house registered a tremor through the joists like a low animal growl. Then the audio from the monitor picked it up. A skiff engine moving against the wind, too steady to be a lobsterman running home from a storm. It cut and drifted. Somewhere above me the porch boards ticked with weight. My palms went wet. I shut the lid on box 14 and replaced it badly, then forced myself to correct it. No point in pretending we weren't here now. I killed the overhead light, let the monitors and a slim strip of LED under the counter paint the room a gray that felt safer than dark. I put my hand on the phone and the brass key and the cheap Android-like talismans. Okay. I whispered to the humming room, to the house that was us and not us, to Ethan wherever he wasn't, to the person on the porch who had just made the boards complain again. Let's find out what water wants. Footsteps paused at the top of the basement stairs. Mrs. Ward. A man's voice, careful, pitched to calm. The kind of voice cops use when they want you to come into the light. It's Detective Hanley. Naomi asked me to check in. Detective Hanley was Naomi Park's partner. He had a smile that never quite touched his eyes and a handshake like he measured what you weighed and filed it away. I didn't answer. The monitor framed a shoulder and a chin and a dark slicker. The house watched the man watch the house. He put his hand on the basement door like a priest blessing a child, then withdrew. Storm's coming in, he called. You shouldn't be out here alone. My mouth went dry. On the monitor, Hanley looked up at the crown molding right where the pinhole was. He smiled the quiet smile of a man who finds what he came for. The phone in my palm vibrated. A new text blinked on the cracked screen from an unknown number. Leave now. Trust Naomi only. Lyle watching East Side. I didn't know the number. I knew the name. Old Man Lyle, the lighthouse keeper who lived with a radio and a whiskey bottle and a briny sense of humor, watched everything that moved across this coast. Ethan used to bring him spare batteries. Hanley's hand closed on the doorknob. I slid the brass key into my pocket, took one steadying breath, and reached for the breaker panel Ethan had labeled with fussy, perfect handwriting. If you built a house that watched itself, you also built a way to make it go blind. I threw the kill switch. The island went dark. The monitors died. Upstairs, Hanley swore. A short, sharp word that sounded honest. Wind pressed its body against the siding and for a moment it was all ocean again. The old, unbothered kind that didn't care who lied to whom. I waited 3 beats the way Ethan had taught me to wait when a power tool jammed, one for fear, one for anger, one for the part of you that knows how to fix things, and then I moved toward the stairs. I had already broken the rule. There was nothing left to do but keep breaking it until it led me to the reason it existed. Cliffhanger. As Mara edges toward the ground floor in blackout, her phone flashes once more with the cued video. Ethan's face filmed in the vault. If you're seeing this, it means I failed at living long enough to tell you the truth myself. I listened for the way people forget they're announcing themselves. Hanley exhaled like a man disappointed he had to work. He moved toward the kitchen. The window was a pale rectangle of rain. Somewhere on the east side a boat bumped against the pilings, a noise the house had always translated into, "You are not alone." I took the stairs soft. On the landing I remembered the quilt and hated that I had looked, because loving something always turned to leverage in a house like this. "Mrs. Ward," Hanley called again. "Mara. Naomi's at the station. They picked up a guy who's been badgering bereaved widows online. She asked me to bring you back." He stood with his hand open, silhouette tidy. The line could have worked on a woman who didn't have her husband's ledger of sins humming in her pocket, and an old man with a radio texting warnings like omens. "I'm fine," I said, stepping into the kitchen's gray. "And I'm leaving." "Good," he said pleasantly. "I'll walk you. The causeway's mine." "The causeway belongs to the tide," he said. And there it was, the kind of sentence men said when they wanted you to hear how reasonable they were. "Let me at least bring the car around." He glanced toward the hallway camera again, this time not even pretending it was an accident. His eyes flicked to the ceiling molding, then down to the basement door. If he went back there, the monitors would betray me with their black silence. I stepped sideways and opened the refrigerator. "You're welcome to a beer," I said absurdly, because I needed 5 seconds to think and hospitality was muscle memory. He smiled, and for the first time I saw something like hunger in it. "No thanks," he said, still smiling. "On duty." "Of course." We stood in that awful politeness and I felt the shape of what he wanted. Not beer, not for me to be safe, but for the house to tell him where Ethan had hidden his teeth. I had 2 cards. Ignorance and audacity. I picked the second because grief had stripped me down to brass. "Detective," I said easily. "Ethan said he was helping you with something. A case." Hanley's smile didn't move but his eyes did. A tiny dilation, the way pupils do when a light goes on. "Did he?" he said. "He mentioned a foundation," I said, walking past him toward the front door as if I had only remembered something I'd been meaning to say. "Said the money smelled wrong. He was worried about a grant officer, June Rivera?" I told him she was my friend, but he said, "People surprise us," Hanley said. And the words came so automatically I knew he had practiced them for someone else. I opened the door. The porch took rain like applause. Across the scrub the mainland showed its lights through the weather in the unromantic way of grocery stores and gas stations. The tide had fallen inches since I'd come. The causeway would be fine if I didn't dawdle. "I'll be right behind you," Hanley said. "I don't need a tail." He shrugged as if to say suit yourself and made a show of pulling his phone from his pocket to text Naomi. I stepped into the rain and made the most important decision of my day. I took the path that didn't exist. Not the crushed shell trail Ethan and I had worn clean on walks, but the tight seam of ground between the boulders where the scrub had not bowed to human feet. If Hanley followed the obvious line, he would miss me for 30 seconds. 30 seconds can be a lifetime if you've practiced being ready. Halfway down the slope the phone in my pocket buzzed. From Lyle. "Duck." I ducked. A flashlight beam raked the path where my head had been. I slid on my hip behind a rock and tasted copper in the rain like a child trying to swallow lightning. The beam moved on. Hanley's voice came soft on his radio, the kind of soft that pretends to be harmless. "She's mobile." There it was. No escorting a widow. No safe ride. Just an update to an unnamed plural that lived on the other end of the channel. At the base of the slope the wind hit me full. The house above crouched into itself. I crossed the open ground like a woman who had done this every night of her life. The beach hissed. The thin black ribbon of the causeway shone where the water licked it. On the far side my car blinked like a lighthouse of cheap red. I was 6 steps onto the sand when a second light came up at the edge of the marsh. Not Hanley's. Lower, meaner. I pivoted on instinct and ran. Not toward my car but sideways into the shallow where eelgrass stitches the world together. My boots filled. I stopped caring about dry and cared only about distance and angles. The second light swung to follow and then stuttered. And I realized with a hot, Bright joy that the person carrying it didn't know the ground like I did. They stumbled. They cursed. The word came salt-sharp and stupid. Language. I shouted, because if I couldn't be safe I could at least be ungovernable. And then a shape rose from the marsh grass like an old god. Old man Lyle is not big. He's weathered into the size of whatever the day requires. But he holds a flare gun like a man who knows what it will do. He didn't point it at the person with the light. He pointed it at the sky and pulled the trigger. Red opened above us with a sound like a giant match struck on the bones of the air. And for a second the island and the causeway and the house and the two men became small honest toys inside a snow globe full of rain. Lyle turned his head toward me and his beard split into a smile. "Evening, Mrs. Ward," he said mildly. "Tide's in a mood." "Isn't it always?" I said breathless. The second light ran. Hanley swore again, closer now. Lyle didn't turn. He cocked the flare gun as if it were a conversation piece and fired a second flower of red into the rain. "Cameras," he said conversationally, eyes on the sky. "He put 'em everywhere out there. And off the island too, where no one expects. Quite the web." "Who did?" I said, even though we both knew. "Your man," Lyle said. "He left a nice view of the boathouse for me. Asked me to watch. Asked me to send you a note when it was time." "When what was time?" He looked at me as if I had asked why a gull flies. "When you broke the rule." Hanley reached the edge of the marsh. Lyle lowered the flare gun. He didn't point it at Hanley. He pointed it at the water a yard in front of him and fired. And the hiss and steam and shock made Hanley stumble back one measured step. A different kind of fear moved in his face. Not of being burned. Of being seen. "Evening, detective," Lyle said. "You look lost." Hanley's smile reassembled itself slowly. "Just ensuring Mrs. Ward gets home safe." "Well," Lyle said cheerfully, "there's an old piece of advice for a night like this. Let water want what it wants." Hanley didn't ask what that meant. He didn't have to. The tide was turning. "Go," Lyle said softly to me. "The way you say now to a bird that cannot decide if the window is real. Walk the sand like it owes you. Don't look back until you're on the other side." I walked. I didn't look back. The rain needled my face until it felt like I had been baptized in something that didn't quite forgive, but at least remembered. Halfway across my phone buzzed. "Unknown home?" I almost typed yes but wrote almost because if this house had taught me anything it was to be precise. When I reached the mainland I did look back. The island crouched dark and small. The house my husband had forbidden me to enter was a black square against the sky. For a second, as if in sympathy or defiance, one window blinked warm and then went dark again, like the house had closed one eye to keep a secret. My car started on the second try. I drove with both palms welded to the wheel, the heater set to the temperature of stubborn. At the first turnoff I pulled into the shadow of a bait shop, and let myself breathe until I could hear my own thoughts over the engine. Then I called Naomi. She answered on the first ring. "Mara? Your partner just followed me off an island," I said. "And I have your name in my dead husband's phone as the person he was trying to text when he could not finish writing 'Don't trust.'" Naomi was silent long enough for me to wonder if the line had gone dead. "Where are you?" she said finally, not a question so much as a decision. "Near Murphy's Bait," I said. "I'm 3 minutes away," she said. "Don't move. Don't talk to anyone else." "And Mara?" "Yes? Thank you for not dying tonight. I'll pencil that into my schedule," I said, because sometimes humor is the only language that keeps you human. I set the phone on my thigh, stared at the wipers arcing back and forth like a metronome keeping time for an orchestra I could not hear, and felt the house settle inside me like a second spine. I had broken the rule. I could live with that. Now I had to live with what came next. Cliffhanger. Naomi arrives and shows Mara a printout. Ethan filed, then withdrew, a sworn statement naming the Harrow Foundation, and Vivian Harrow as a familial match to Mara in a confidential DNA submission. Naomi slid into the passenger seat like someone who'd been running without looking like she'd run. She wore a Navy rain shell, and the kind of expression that tells the truth without asking permission. She handed me a folded printout inside a clear sleeve. The heading at the top was bureaucratic and bland. Confidential voluntary kinship screen. Halfway down a name Vivian Harrow. And next to it, in the cautious language of labs and liability, possible second-degree match. High likelihood of shared paternal line. I didn't request this, Naomi said. It came through a private courier to the station. No sender. A week before Ethan died. My husband submitted my DNA to a lab without my consent, I said. And the way the sentence sat in the air made it taste like something I didn't want to swallow. Or he submitted his, Naomi said. If he suspected a link, he might have been looking for a hit and used himself as a proxy. That can sometimes. I stared at the paper until the letters wavered. Vivian Harrow is what, my aunt? We don't know that, Naomi said calmly. We know the test wants us to think we know that. And we know whoever sent it intended to increase your odds of walking into a trap. Hanley followed me, I said. He knew about the cameras. He called someone. I know, she said. Which is why you and I are going to do something reckless and smart before he does something stupid and permanent. What's the reckless smart thing? Going back, she said deadpan. To the island. To your husband's vault. You tell me what's in it. I'll tell you what gets us a search warrant versus what gets us killed. We made the causeway just as the tide settled into the cooperative hour that locals misname luck. Lyle's light in the lighthouse winked like an old man's mischief. Naomi parked in the pines, killed the headlights, and let the engine tick itself quiet. We took the scrub path in a crouch. When the house showed itself, it did so with the disinterest of a thing that had already decided what it was. You weren't kidding, Naomi whispered inside the replica living room. This is unnerving. It's like a museum exhibition of our life curated by someone who loved us and didn't trust us to be human, I said. She tracked the pinhole cameras with her eyes and shook her head once, not in judgment but in respect for craft. When we reached the pantry door, I pushed. The hinges obeyed like we'd rehearsed. The vault hummed its small private thunder. Naomi's gaze flicked over the map, the threads, the rows of boxes. He built himself a grand jury, she murmured. Good man. Good man with a habit of locking me out, I said, and hated how it sounded like betrayal instead of grief. Sometimes the only way to keep poison from spreading is to let only one person drink it, she said. I don't recommend the method. We didn't touch anything for a full minute. Naomi circled wide like a bomb tech. I turned the android on. The unsent draft to Naomi waited like a held breath. Don't trust, she read. He didn't get to finish. Who did he mean? Your partner, I said, and then because it felt like witnessing, Hanley. Naomi didn't flinch. I never liked that his shoes were too clean after groundwork, she said. Okay. Show me the box that made you almost throw up. 14, I said, and then 7. We opened them side by side like a grotesque advent calendar. Ledgers, grant disbursements, monthly memos with the Harrow Foundation seal, and the adoption file photocopies with the Ellis original label that felt like someone rearranging my bones. Naomi scanned, photographed, scanned again. This is not just charity fraud, she said. This is an organ-matching racket wearing a tuxedo and a donor wall. Donation, I said, and heard Ethan's voice on the air. You can live well if you obey what water wants. Not donors. Matches. Naomi found the flash drive behind the replica wedding photo. She held it up like a caught fish. You knew this was here? I watched a dead version of my living room tell me, I said. Play it. We used a secure laptop she brought in a zippered sleeve like a doctor's bag. The screen bloomed to Ethan's face. He looked steady. He looked like a man telling the truth slowly so no one could say they hadn't heard it. If you're watching this, he said, hi kid. You look beautiful angry. Parks, if that's you. Thank you for not arresting me for evidence I'm not/am supposed to have. Naomi's mouth quirked despite herself. I built this place wrong on purpose, Ethan said. It looks like home so it can scare the right person into wondering how much of their life is a set. I'm sorry. I let love be the lie that kept you safe. I kept the adoption track quiet because Vivian Harrow has her fingers in the clerk's office and because I thought I could fix it without making you look at it. I was wrong. They buy time with grants. They buy organs with favors. They buy silence with health. He swallowed. The camera shook once as if he'd breathed on it. Dead man switch, he said. 48 hours without a code pushes everything to the prosecutor's private inbox, to Park's vault at the station, to my friend Vega who owes me a punch, and to a reporter at the Globe who doesn't yet know he's the brave one. If I'm late, they're early. If I'm dead, it means this video is the last thing I can do for you that isn't a lie. He looked left as if hearing something. When he looked back, his work comm was gone. Mara, he said, and my name in his mouth broke something inside my sternum. There's a second key. Jacket lining. You already found it. It opens the boathouse at the South Tributary. That's where the ledgers with real names live. Park is with you, take her. If anyone else is with you, make sure they like the color of prison jumpsuits. The screen went black and then showed coordinates, pulsing in white like a heartbeat. Naomi exhaled. Okay, she said, the word doing the work of 1,000 others. Okay. We need copies. We need chain of custody. We need plausible deniability and bravery in equal measure. Do we need backup? I asked. We have it, she said, nodding at the coordinates. And we have one other thing. What? The truth, she said simply. It's amazing how heavy it is when you've had to carry the absence of it. We started photographing with a method that would have made Ethan proud. When we were nearly done, Naomi tilted her head. Do you hear that? I did. Not a motor. Not rain. A soft, almost polite tap. Upstairs at the window. 1. Pause. 2. Pause. 3. Like a code. Naomi's hand went to the grip on her hip, her body flattening into the geometry of someone who'd once done training she didn't brag about. Stay, she said. I'm not a dog, I said, and followed anyway. We reached the living room as a shadow slid away from the glass. Naomi flicked the curtain with 2 fingers. The porch was empty. The pines beyond danced like they were eavesdropping. Someone wants us to know they can reach us, she said. Someone with patience. Hanley, I said. Or someone who wants us to believe it's Hanley, she said. Either way, we're done for tonight. We killed the vault light, reset the breaker to bring the cameras back to their illusion of control, and left the house as we'd found it, except for the fact that entering a truth changes it, even if you close the door quietly. Cliffhanger. As we stepped onto the causeway, the cheap Android buzzed to life in my pocket with a single countdown. 47 hours 12 minutes and 59 seconds. I slept an hour that felt like a dare. In the morning, the weather had the hungover clarity of a storm that had decided to forgive us for now. I drove to the gallery because normalcy is a shield painted to look like art. I unlocked, turned on the track lights, and stood under a photograph of a woman's hands in flower and thought, I don't know my mother's hands. June arrived with coffee and a smile that tried too hard. Her raincoat shone. Her eyes were puffy in a way she hadn't bothered to hide. She put the coffee on the counter, looked past me to the prints like she wanted them to be a wall. I heard about the funeral, she said carefully, as if the news had taken the scenic route to her mouth. I would have come but. You were busy, I said. With the foundation. Her eyes flinched. What foundation? The one that pays your salary, I said gently. The Harrows. The grant program you told me was your redemption arc after state funding dried up. She bristled. If this is about money, It's about ledgers with your initials on case notes from my file. I said. It's about donor recruitment in quotation marks. Something cracked behind her gaze. Not surprise. The surrender of a person who realizes the truth is a better currency than the lie they can afford. Ethan asked for help, she said finally, voice low. He came to the office pretending to do a renovation bid. He asked for access to sealed archives, adoptions from the late 80s when Harrow Wellness started doing free prenatal care. It was a good program, she added miserably. It helped real women. It also helped the wrong people find desperate ones. Why didn't you tell me? I said. Because I wanted to prove I wasn't a mistake you made in college, she said, a sad flare of old bravado. Because if I told you, you'd look at me like you're looking at me now. Like I'm a knife you forgot in the drawer. I could have said 100 things that would have sounded like the moral high ground. I said the one that was true. Are you in danger? I asked. She blinked. What? Are you in danger? I repeated. Because we are. June's laugh turned to a sob on the way out. They pay me to be quiet, she said. They pay me to fill out forms that make the money look like it's doing the right kind of good. They don't trust me with anything that can't be laundered by a committee meeting. Who's they? I asked. Vivian, she said immediately, then shook her head. No, that's not fair. Vivian orchestrates. Caleb moves things. The men beneath him do the things that require bruises. The door chime tinkled. We both looked up. A man in a navy suit stood just inside, rain on his shoulders like confetti. He had an unremarkable face, the kind that gets rented by institutions. He held his phone at his thigh, camera already up, as if we were a living exhibit. City inspection, he said pleasantly. Random. We passed inspection last month, I said. New initiative, he said, smile brightening by exactly 2 lumens. June picked up her purse like a reflex. I have to go, she breathed. No, you don't, I said, keeping my tone gallery soft. Sir, we're closed. Then I'll wait, he said, and took a slow look around, the way men do when they want you to know they've memorized a room you thought was yours. I texted Naomi under the counter visitor. Navy suit. Phone low. Might be a city nothing. Might be a hero something. She wrote back, stay public. Stay boring. Leaving station. I forced a smile into my voice. If you're waiting, I can recommend a very good croissant a block down, I said. Tell them Mara sent you and they'll overcharge you less. He smiled like retail. I'm fine here. June's hand shook. She tapped her screen, then shoved it toward me for a second. A photo. A skiff. A shadow on the water. A timestamp from the night Ethan died. He wasn't alone, she whispered. Before I could speak, my own phone buzzed with a number that had signed itself with salt. Boathouse. Noon. Tide says yes. Bring the cop who doesn't smell like cologne. I looked at the suited man in my gallery, at June's hands, at the photograph of the woman in flower. I picked up the closed sign and flipped it to open. Welcome in, I told the man in the suit, and smiled like I had decided to sell him something expensive and unhelpful. By the time Naomi arrived, the man had drifted away to check a storefront. June had fled with half a resolution dangling like an uncut thread. Naomi watched him through the glass for a beat and said, That's not city. That's private. They buy former. It makes the bat-shaped hole in their wallet feel useful. We need to be at a boathouse in 20, I said. Good, she said. I brought rubber boots and a warrant application with blanks. We crossed town in a drizzle that pretended to be delicate. The boathouse at the south tributary sat on an inlet that liked secrets. Dark water brush that kept counsel. A roofline that ducked like a confession. Lyle stood at the dock with his hat in his hand as if greeting parishioners. Mrs. Ward. Officer Park, he said. Boys with shiny cuffs been cruising this channel all morning. Took a couple of photos of my radio antenna. I waved. You always were a people person, Naomi said. Lyle winked. I prefer persons to people. Less aggregate sin. He led us inside. It smelled of oil and rope and the kind of clean metal that tells you it's ready. The false planks underfoot were newer than the rest of the floor. Lyle tapped one with the toe of his boot, then another, counting a rhythm I recognized from nights at the island house. 1 pause, 2 pause, 3. You see the net the night Ethan died? I asked him. I saw the net, he said. Saw it snag, then saw it float free too clean for the sea to have done it a kindness. Cut, Naomi said. Cut, Lyle agreed. Sharp. On purpose. With time taken. We pried up the planks. Beneath, plastic totes with rubber gaskets waited like the patient dead. Inside, ledgers with names and dates and notes that did not bother with euphemism. Prospect. O positive match flagged. Mother hesitant. Offer prenatal bed, refer Vivian. Naomi's face did not move for a full 5 seconds. Then she breathed. "This is the spine," she said. "With a spine you can stand a thing up in court." The door hinges groaned. We all looked up. The man from the gallery stood in the frame alone, damp, smiling. "I knew I'd find you here," he said. "Boathouses are where secrets go to mildew." Naomi's badge came out of her pocket like a blade. "Step back, sir. This is an active scene." "I'm sure it is," he said. "I'm also sure you don't have paper." "Want to bet?" she asked, and held up the half-completed application like a threat that doubles as a promise. He tilted his head just enough to be threatening without being illegal. "Mrs. Ward," he said, ignoring Naomi, "Mrs. Harrow requests your presence this evening. Family matters are always so much tidier before they become public health crises." "Tell Vivian I'll see her in Hell's powder room," I said, because dignity isn't always the same as diplomacy. He smiled wider as if I'd said yes. "I'll inform her you accept." He stepped back, closed the door, and left us with the sound of rain that had decided to get serious again. Cliffhanger. Naomi lifted a ledger page with tweezers. June Rivera's signature authorizing a routine wellness grant for a clinic patient with my birth mother's name. We boxed the ledgers with the ritual that makes things legal. Photos, timestamps, signatures. Lyle produced a roll of evidence tape from nowhere. Naomi shook her head. He shrugged. "I like being prepared," he said. "And I like my island to stop being useful to criminals." We hauled the boxes to Naomi's trunk under the shelter of her open hatch. The rain had graduated. In the distance, the lighthouse winked in a pattern that made my teeth hurt with memory. Naomi's phone buzzed with a message she let me read over her shoulder. "Hanley. Where are you? Chief wants your update on Ward death paperwork." Naomi typed 3 words and hit send. In front of him. Then she put her phone face down on the ledge. "June signed a grant for your mother," Naomi said, voice neutral. "It might have been paperwork she didn't know the soul of. It might have been consent laundered into a checkbox. It might have been a way to make my mother's refusal look like a delay," I said. "Until she disappeared." "We'll talk to June," she said. "But not until we can keep her alive for the conversation." We drove to June's 4th-floor walk-up because texting her had suddenly felt like leaving a note on a door already being watched. Her building smelled like onions and dog and ambition. She opened at our second knock, eyes red. Hair in a top knot that said not okay in a language we both spoke. "I didn't know," she said before I could accuse her of anything. "Mara, I swear on every stupid thing we loved Midnight Pizza. That band you made me pretend to like. The way we said we'd never be our mother's daughters, I didn't know." She was crying the way people do when they've been trying very hard not to. She led us to the kitchen table where she had laid out papers like offerings. "Look," she said, tapping a form. "I signed wellness grants, transportation vouchers, hotel stipends for women who needed somewhere to stay before procedures." "What procedures?" Naomi asked. "Prenatal care," June said immediately, then faltered. "And other care." They said the stipends were about choice. They said we were giving women options. I believed that. But then the follow-up lists would come in and the names would shift. Or vanish. And when I asked, the answer was always a sigh and a reminder about confidentiality. Naomi slid the ledger page from the boathouse between us like a dealer laying down a high card. "This is your signature authorizing a grant for a woman named Ana Lucia Ellis." June hiccuped. "I know that name," she whispered and looked at me with the most naked, awful honesty. "I knew it years ago. I saw it once in a stack and thought it's a common enough surname. I told myself that. I put it in the drawer in my head where you put things that will eat you if you feed them." "Who told you to sign?" Naomi asked. "I don't need telling to sign," June said fiercely. "I sign because a woman needs a bed and a ride. But if you mean who brought the stack, Caleb's people. The ones who wear suits that don't creak when they move." "And Vivian?" I asked. "She floats above signatures," June said bitterly. But sometimes she would make a note in the margin that wasn't a note. "Make sure this mother feels supported. Tell her there's a long-term plan." You know the tone you use with a child you want to convince to go to sleep. Naomi took all of this in with the muscle of her jaw working twice. June, she said softly, if we put you on paper as a cooperating witness, I can move you. Today. June shook her head. If you move me, they'll know I talked. If they know I talked, the girls at the clinic won't come back. I can't be the reason a girl thinks her only safety is the one that hurts forever. That's not your job, I said, and heard the hypocrisy. How many jobs had I assigned myself today because love had turned to leverage? June wiped her face on a paper towel and laughed a small shred of a laugh. I know, she said. But I keep taking jobs no one is hiring for. The buzzer sounded. All three of us froze. June pressed the intercom. Hello? Delivery. A man's voice sang pleasantly. I didn't order anything, June said. From Mrs. Harrow, the voice said. And the way he said Mrs. Harrow made the apartment colder. Naomi was already moving. Back room, she said. Now. June didn't argue. We ducked into a bedroom with a bed that had never learned how to stay made. Naomi left the door cracked and took a position where the wall would eat the first 5 bullets. She drew. The safety came off with the soft sound of a decision real people make. Keys scraped on the other side. The lock didn't give. The delivery man knocked once, twice, 3 times, and with each knock I heard the same code that had tapped the island house window. I texted Lyle with my thumb barely moving June's. Visitors. He wrote back immediately like a man who refuses to sleep when a storm is in the long muscles of the coast. I'll call in a smell complaint to the building. Fireboys love the field trip. The knocking stopped. Silence arranged the air around us. For a full minute we didn't breathe like living people. Then the buzzer sounded again. Another apartment answering. Package for 403? A different voice said. 4th floor. The intercom answered shakily. Naomi didn't move for a count of 20. Then she slid the gun back into its holster in a motion that made me want to send a thank you card to whomever had taught her. She exhaled. Okay, she said. We're not going to be able to hide and hope this goes away. We're going to be loud. We're going to be legal. We're going to be public in ways that make their kind of violence stupid. What does that look like? I asked. In a world where their money owns the definition of respectable. It looks like a press packet and a prosecutor having a very good day, she said. It looks like a dead man switch we need to understand before it misunderstands the moment. My phone buzzed with the cheap Android's humorless alert. 46 hours 1 minute and 17 seconds. 46 hours, I said. Then the tide turns. June sat down at her table like a woman walking into a deposition she could not avoid. Tell me what to do, she said. Tell me how to be useful without getting anyone killed. Lyle texted again, succinct as always. Net that cut was braided monofilament. Knife had serrations. Left-handed. Can your cop friend use that? Naomi's eyes lit with the particular joy of a cop who hears the word fact. Yes, Mr. Lyle, she said, typing with her thumbs flying. Yes, she can. June squeezed my hand as if apologies could be exchanged like breath. I didn't know, she repeated. I believe you, I said. But I don't think that matters anymore. We're all paying for something we didn't do. June looked up, something like steel setting behind her wet eyes. Fine, she said. Then let's send the bill. Cliffhanger. My phone chimed with an unknown number. A single photo appeared. Ethan's boat, a man's shadow at the helm, not Ethan's, and in the corner a pale square. The nursery window at the island house lit. Naomi dropped me at my house like a chauffeur who carried ghosts instead of passengers. The air inside still smelled of Ethan's cologne because I hadn't been brave enough to wash the pillowcase. I stared at the mirror above the mantel and said out loud, "You married a man who lied." Silence agreed with me. The next morning June texted, "We need to talk alone." We met at a diner that served burnt coffee with the kind of cheer only cash-only businesses can manage. She looked smaller than I remembered, like confession had shaved an inch off her. "I lied to you," she said before her coffee cooled. "You don't say," I answered, sharper than intended. She pressed her palms flat to the table. "I didn't just see your mother's name. I knew Ethan was digging for it, and I helped." I pulled records for him that I shouldn't have been able to touch. Adoption files. Clinic logs. He promised he'd keep you out of it. By dying first, I said. June's eyes filled. He told me if anything happened to him you'd come looking. He said you'd hate him for it, but hate was safer than the hero's love. Her words curled under my ribs and stayed there. Then she slid a photo across the table. It was Ethan weeks before he died, standing outside the boathouse with a man I recognized only because my nightmares had furnished him. Caleb Harrow. The smile on Caleb's face was warm. The tension in Ethan's jaw was not. Why give me this now? I asked. Because they know you opened the house, she whispered. And because once they know you broke the rule, they don't stop. Cliffhanger. As we left, a man in a fishing cap lifted his phone, snapping our picture. 2 days later, I sat in a probate courtroom watching my husband's life reduced to line items. Lawyers for the Harrow Foundation filed petitions with surgical efficiency, motions to freeze accounts, to challenge Ethan's deed to Hickory Isle. Their argument. The island house was never marital property. Vivian Harrow herself sat across the aisle, a vision of pearls and precision. She offered condolences like they were receipts. Afterward she asked me to tea. Against my better judgment I went. Her townhouse overlooked the harbor. The view was expensive, the silence curated. You're carrying Ethan's debt, she said softly, pouring Earl Grey like she was officiating a sacrament. He wanted to save the wrong people. You could be smarter. I don't do smart like you do, I said. She smiled, pitying. You do it like your mother did. And we both know how that ended. I nearly dropped my cup. What do you know about my mother? Enough to say she was principled. Principals don't pay hospital bills. When I left, I checked Ethan's jacket one more time. Inside the lining, stitched with surgeon's precision, was a second brass key crescent notch at the base. Exactly where the video had promised. Cliffhanger. That night I dreamed of the nursery glowing, and when I woke my phone lit with a text. Come to the boathouse. Midnight. Alone. Instead of obeying the text, I called Tomas Vega, the journalist Ethan once trusted. He answered on the third ring, voice hoarse. I figured you'd call, he said. We met at a greasy tavern where anonymity came with the beer. He looked like a man who hadn't slept since 2012. His laptop was covered in stickers from protests nobody remembered. He showed me a folder of Ethan's off-record notes. Maps, names, fragments of conversations. He knew there was a leak inside the PD, Tomas said. That's why he used me. Said if he didn't make it, someone had to be brave enough to burn bridges. Were you? I asked. I was broke enough to be brave, he said bitterly. Then he leaned close. Naomi's partner? Hanley? He's been seen taking envelopes from Caleb's driver. Not bribes, directives. Before I could ask more, a commotion rattled the bar. A patrol unit outside. Naomi stormed in, grabbed Tomas by the collar, and dragged him toward the door. They just found cocaine in his car, she hissed. Planted. Get out of here, Mara. This isn't an arrest, it's a warning. Cliffhanger. Tomas shouted over his shoulder as they shoved him into the cruiser. Check the tide logs. Ethan's death doesn't fit. By evening I couldn't ignore the text. I walked the causeway under a swollen moon. Halfway across, headlights flared. An old truck barreling down the sand like a bull. I ran. The horn blared, tires skidding. The world narrowing to the hiss of water. At the last second I leapt sideways into the icy channel. Salt swallowed me whole. When I clawed onto the rocks, shivering and gasping, the truck was gone. My car's taillights winked faintly across the inlet. The house loomed above, silent. Inside, the vault still hummed. A folder sat on the counter I hadn't left open. Labeled in Ethan's tidy hand. Ellis, original. Inside my adoption file, yes. But also a police report from 1989. My mother's name circled in red ink. Missing. Case closed. Insufficient evidence. Cliffhanger. The android buzzed. A timer now read. 42 hours 7 minutes and 19 seconds. And below it, A draft email queued for automatic send. If you're reading this, I'm already dead. Release everything. I called Naomi from the vault. She came with her hair damp from the rain, looking like someone who had stopped believing in coincidence. This is the spine, she said, flipping through the file. Your mother testified against the Harrows in '89. Then vanished. Case buried. Buried by who? I asked. She looked at me. Ask yourself who had the money, the reach, and the interest. On the Android, a new attachment appeared. Ethan's handwriting scanned into a PDF. Mara, if you find this, you'll know why I couldn't let you in. Because the truth isn't that I kept you safe. It's that I kept you. I stared until the words blurred. Naomi squeezed my shoulder. 41 hours until this detonates. When it does, they'll come for you harder than they already have. I looked at the map on the wall, the threads leading from clinics to foundations to my mother's name. Then we make sure they regret every hour they gave us, I said. Cliffhanger. Outside, a skiff engine roared alive, too close, too late. The monitors showed 2 men in slickers stepping onto the porch, guns under their coats. Naomi and I slipped out the back as the men stormed the front. Rain slicked the rocks into glass. We crouched behind the shed until their voices blurred with the tide. By the time we reached Naomi's car, both of us were bleeding from scratches but alive. The next day, Naomi came with an invitation in hand, thick cardstock, embossed. The Harrow Foundation Annual Gala. They want you presentable, she said grimly. Means they want to control the stage before the story writes itself. I wore Ethan's favorite black dress. Naomi wore a navy suit that made her badge look decorative. The ballroom glowed with chandeliers and the soft lies of philanthropy. Waiters carried champagne like peace offerings. Then I saw June. In a silver gown, pale, her mascara barely hiding the redness around her eyes. She gripped a keycard so tightly her knuckles whitened. What are you doing here? I hissed when I intercepted her near the restrooms. They promised if I vouched for you they'd leave me out of it, she whispered. But Mara, you need this. She shoved the keycard into my hand. It opens Caleb's study upstairs. His files. But I can't. Before she could finish, Caleb Harrow stepped behind her, smiling for the crowd, but his eyes pinned me like a specimen. Mrs. Ward, he said smoothly. So pleased you could come. Ethan spoke of you often. My blood ran cold. He said it as if Ethan still could. Cliffhanger. A waiter passed, carrying champagne flutes, and nestled between them I saw it. Ethan's wedding band threaded on a chain. Tomas Vega appeared 2 days later, limping into the gallery with an arm in a sling and a bruise spreading purple across his jaw. They tried to drown me, he rasped. Off the pier. But I'm not as heavy as they thought. He slapped a waterproof envelope on the counter. Inside, tide logs, weather reports, and Coast Guard patrol records. Ethan's accident? Impossible. The tide tables show slack water, not a rip. His boat was steered into trouble. Before we could celebrate a crash outside, Naomi sprinted out, weapon drawn. Tomas staggered after her, shouting. By the time I reached the street, a black sedan peeled away. Tomas lay half in the gutter, coughing blood. They want me quiet, he gasped, grabbing my wrist. But listen, Mara. Ethan's last message wasn't just for you. It was for me. Look in the... His eyes rolled back. An ambulance wailed, but all I heard was the unfinished sentence. Later, Naomi said he'd survive. Barely. But the warning was clear. Anyone who touched Ethan's truth ended up waterlogged. Cliffhanger. Back at the house, the burner phone lit up on its own. The timer. 36 hours 4 minutes and 11 seconds. And a new message draft. Deliver to Globe. Attached drive. Deadline absolute. We returned to Hickory Isle at dawn, hoping to collect what Ethan had hidden before the timer forced its hand. But the house had other ideas. We weren't alone. Through the monitor feeds we watched dark slickers move along the tree line. 5 men, silent, rifles slung. They weren't here to talk. Naomi's jaw tightened. He built defenses, didn't he? Always, I said, and pressed the breaker switch Ethan had labeled Storm Protocol. Steel shutters clanged down. Deadbolts engaged. A siren howled from the roof, blending with the lighthouse horn. The house became a fortress, exactly as Ethan had designed. But that meant one thing. He'd expected this siege. The men outside shouted, demanding I come out. Naomi whispered into her radio, calling for backup she knew wouldn't come fast enough. I turned to the replica wedding photo. Something inside me insisted there was more. Behind the glass, taped to the backing, I found a slim flash drive. Naomi slid it into her laptop. A folder opened. Video files, transcripts, raw deposition footage. Doctors speaking too casually about paper donors. Women described as inventory. One clip froze me. Ethan, pale and tired, recording. Mara, if they breach this house, don't let them take you alive. You're worth more than you know. Outside, a shotgun blast rattled the shutters. Cliffhanger. On the monitor, Hanley appeared among the men, shouting orders. My stomach dropped. The leak was no longer hidden. Naomi played the drive's largest file. The screen filled with the deposition, a doctor under oath, smirking as he described the Harrow Foundation's procurement program. He called it efficient, humane. He laughed about paperwork donors, never knowing they were donors. This, Naomi whispered, is enough to light the match. Another file autoplayed. Ethan again in the vault. His voice cracked. If you're watching this, Mara, I'm sorry for the nursery. I wanted you to believe we could still have a life after the fight. I built it because I wanted to see you as a mother, even if it was only here. Forgive me. My throat closed. I pressed my palm to the quilt, swore I felt his warmth in it. Then Naomi's phone buzzed. She paled. It's Hanley. He just issued an arrest warrant for you. Possession of stolen records. They're framing you. What now? I asked hollow. We stream it, she said. Not all of it. Just enough to lock their hands. She uploaded the deposition to a secure drive and sent it to a prosecutor she trusted. Outside, Hanley's men tried the door again, hammering like wolves. Cliffhanger. Naomi checked her email and froze. The prosecutor replied with one line. Received. But who told you Vivian Harrow was your aunt? I stared at the screen until the words blurred. Vivian Harrow, my aunt. Naomi exhaled slowly. That's why Ethan tested your DNA. That's why he hid the nursery. He knew you weren't just another case. You were theirs. The weight of it crushed me. My mother disappeared after testifying. Vivian circling like a vulture dressed as a matriarch. And me, the proof neither could erase. Naomi clasped my shoulder. This doesn't mean they own you. It means you're the witness who can sink them. Before I could answer, the burner phone buzzed again. A new message, unsent but queued. Send full archive to Prosecutor Vega Park. And to Mara's family, if she still wants one. I typed back, though no one was on the other end. What family? No answer. Just the timer. 34 hours 22 minutes and 55 seconds. That evening Vivian called me directly. Her voice was calm, rich, persuasive. Come home, Mara, she said. You belong to us more than you know. Stop fighting. We can make this easier. Her words were a knife wrapped in silk. I'll never be yours, I said. You already are, she whispered. Blood is blood. And blood pays its debts. Cliffhanger. Naomi slammed her laptop shut. Mara, the DNA report isn't just Vivian. It shows a paternal link. Which means Caleb Harrow isn't just your enemy. She looked at me like the world had tilted. He might be your father. We spent an hour trying to breathe around the word father. Naomi paced the vault with a legal pad, transforming panic into bullet points. On the Android, the counter ticked. 33 hours 58 minutes and 2 seconds. DNA says Vivian is a second-degree match, Naomi said, thinking aloud. That makes her your paternal aunt or half-aunt. The paternal link on the report means your father is from her side of the tree. Caleb may or may not be blood, but he controls the tree. The report that prosecutor sent, I said. Why did she phrase it like a dare? Because she knows this isn't just criminal. It's dynastic. We pulled Box 7 Ellis original back down. Buried under the photocopied adoption file was a sheet I hadn't clocked. A Harrow Wellness staff roster from 1989. One name circled in Ethan's neat pencil. Robert Harrow M.D. Next to it, a smaller note. Deceased, 1992. Accidental fall. Vivian's brother. Your father may have been a dead doctor, Naomi said softly. Vivian's brother. Caleb married into the name and kept the machine humming. I swallowed. If my father died, why am I still leverage? Because a family that launders organs through philanthropy won't let a dead brother's secret stay dead. They consolidate. They archive. They curate blood. Her phone vibrated. A text from Lyle. Boathouse looks quiet. Left-handed serrations again on a new net. Noontide tomorrow is kind. Bring waiters and nerve. I touched Ethan's jacket lining. The second brass key a cold moon against my palm. The monitors showed Pines refusing to talk. Somewhere in town, June was deciding whether to keep breathing in public. Naomi tapped the counter with her pen. We follow Ethan's coordinates at first light. We pull the ledgers, get chain of custody tight, and walk into the DA's office with something they can't sit on. And Hanley? He'll try to sit on us, she said. We make that stupid by being seen. By dawn we were back on the mainland. Naomi looped Tomas's editor and the prosecutor into an encrypted thread. I sent June a simple "Are you safe?" She answered with a single heart that felt like a bandage barely holding. At the boathouse we found what Ethan had promised. Real names married to blood types, timestamps, clinic wellness stipends mapped to surgical dates at partner hospitals. In the margins, a careful second-hand wrote consent. Beside 3 patients, one of them Ana Lucia Ellis. Next to her name refused. Then a newer note. Resolved via Foundation Council. Naomi's jaw flexed. Resolved means disappeared. We photographed, logged, sealed. Lyle stood guard on the dock, radio low, eyes on the water. When we were almost done, my phone lit with an unknown number. Tonight. The house. Alone. Bring what you think you have. Leave with what you want. See. Caleb, I said. Naomi read it over my shoulder. He'll come armed with charm and gunmen. We'll come armed with redundancy. What does redundancy look like? Copies off-site. Triggers set. And mics. She set a button camera at my collarbone, check signal, and met my eyes. If he confesses, we don't lose it to a bad connection. On the drive back, the android ticked to 31 hours, 10 minutes, and 25 seconds. The tide chart in my head flipped pages. I could hear Ethan. You can live well if you obey what water wants. Tonight, water wanted a storm. Cliffhanger. June texted a photo from her window. Hanley in the street below, head tilted, like a man deciding which door to kick first. June wasn't answering. We found her door cracked, apartment untidy in a way that wasn't hers. I called her name. The echo sounded like bad news. On the table, a note in block letters. If you want your friend breathing, bring everything to the island. Midnight. No cops. See. Naomi read it twice, then folded it into an evidence sleeve. He wants us off balance, she said. He thinks we'll choose people over paper and walk him blind. He's right about the first part, I said. She didn't argue. Then we make no cops true on the surface and false underneath. She texted Lyle and Tomas's editor. She called the prosecutor from a payphone in a bodega that sold bait and cigarettes in absolution. We're not asking for permission, she told me afterward. We're asking for proximity. The feds will be a ripple behind us. At dusk, we rechecked Ethan's redundancy. The dead man switch was still counting down. Naomi configured a shadow trigger tied to the island's Wi-Fi. If signal went dead or my mic cut, the full drive would push to the Globe, the DA, and a federal Dropbox. She left a copy of the boathouse ledgers with Lyle, sealing them in a cooler under blocks of ice. Fish won't be the only thing kept fresh tonight, he said, eyes kind and flinty. We crossed at low tide, wind already shouldering up. The house crouched under the pines. The porch light burned a warm lie. Inside, the replica living room waited like a set between takes. Park the car on the causeway mouth, Naomi said. Nose facing out. If we have to run, we run downhill. I found the nursery and pressed my hand to the quilt. If you're watching, forgive me, I whispered to the absent camera. I'm breaking all of your rules for the right reasons. Footsteps on the porch. A silhouette in the glass. Not Hanley. Caleb's posture had the relaxed arrogance of men who expect the world to move. He entered alone. No slickers. No obvious weapon. Just that politician's half-smile and a chain peeking above his collar. The one I'd seen at the gala with Ethan's ring threaded on it. Mrs. Ward, he said pleasantly. You've been busy. And you've been sloppy, I said, voice steady because the mic needed it. Take off the chain. He glanced down, smiled. This? A memento. Ethan gave it to me when he asked for protection. Try another lie, I said. He sighed theatrically, slipped the chain into his pocket, and walked the room like a collector admiring provenance. You know, this place really is clever. Copy that's almost right. Enough to make you question which life is the real one. It's the one where my mother wasn't converted into a line item, I said. He looked up sharply. There it was, temper thin as tissue. You don't know what your mother was, he said softly. She was a woman with needs we met. By making her disappear? He didn't blink. By making her useful. The house felt smaller with that word in it. Where's June? I asked. He smiled. Somewhere safe. She's not my prize. Then what is? You, he said simply. You and your aunt and your entire unfortunate pedigree. Vivian is my aunt, I said. You're not my father. He laughed once. God no. Had that fixed after our second kid. Your father was a genius with a scalpel and terrible with stairs. But blood, Mrs. Ward, blood is a brand. And I'm a very good licensing agent. Wind leaned against the siding, listening. You killed Ethan, I said. Ethan killed Ethan, he countered, shrugging. He made the mistake of thinking a dead man's switch can't be defused. You defuse it by killing everyone around it first. Weed the garden, then cut the root. He was confessing in sentences that would play well in court. Naomi's mic feed hissed green in my ear. We were good. Until we weren't. The front door opened without a knock. Hanley stepped in, gun low, rain glittering on his slicker. Time's up, he said. Naomi moved from the hall like an answer. The four of us formed a geometry no architect would approve. Detective, Caleb said smoothly. As discussed. Hanley spared him a glance. We're not in as discussed anymore, he said. She started streaming. He nodded at me. My stomach fell. Had our trigger started early? Naomi's face remained still. You don't know where the stream goes, Hanley, she said. And you won't. Then I'll shoot the transmitter and negotiate with the widow, he said. Try it, Naomi said, raising her weapon. I'll put you down and explain it to your wife over good coffee. The air hummed like a live wire. Cliffhanger. A flare burst red outside. The lighthouse's glow drowned in bloodlight. An old man Lyle's voice boomed from a bullhorn. Gentlemen, the Coast Guard would like a word about your boat registration. Sirens on water sound different, hollow certain. Hanley's eyes flicked to the window. Caleb's smile cooled. He slipped his ring chain back around his neck like armor. Stand down, Naomi said, voice flat, cop calm. We're past the point where bullets help you. Hanley's jaw flexed. He raised the gun a degree, indecision made visible. I did the foolish, necessary thing. I moved. Not toward Hanley, not toward Caleb, but toward the breaker labeled Storm Protocol. Ethan had wired the house to obey grief. It would obey rage, too. I threw the switch. Shutters thunked. The siren howled. The lights died. In the black, Naomi shifted a single disciplined step. Caleb swore. Hanley fired once. The shot went wide and chewed wood. I ran on memory, down the hall, left at the replica lamp, through the pantry, down to the vault that hummed on a backup, the only room still lit. Mara! Naomi barked. Stay on mic. I'm here, I said. He's bleeding. Caleb stumbled into the doorway, shoulder grazed red, dignity intact. Hanley followed, eyes too bright. End it, Caleb hissed. Shoot her. Shoot Park. We'll sort it out in court with better lawyers. Hanley's hand shook. A lifetime of small, paid-for cowardices added up to the one moment that required a choice. He lowered the gun. Do it yourself, he said. Caleb stared at him like a man examining a defective tool. Then he lunged for me. Naomi shot once clean center mass. Caleb fell like a felled tree, chain clattering. Ethan's ring flashing once before it skittered under a cabinet. Outside, Lyle's bullhorn rolled into laughter. The sirens were close enough to rattle the house's foundations. The front door splintered. The Coast Guard's boots thudded water across Ethan's perfect replica rug. Uniforms filled the hall. Hanley tried to run. Naomi didn't bother to chase. The men with tridents on their shoulders did it for her. They brought him back in cuffs, hair plastered, eyes ruined. Detective Hanley, a federal agent said mildly, we should talk about your income streams. Naomi exhaled. I realized my teeth were chattering. Not from cold but from the hard drop after adrenaline. June, I said suddenly. In the boathouse, Lyle's voice crackled over his radio from the porch. Found her taped, pissed, and opinionated. She bit a man which I respect. Medic says she's mostly fine and very angry. I laughed until my knees gave and the vault cabinet became a chair. Naomi crouched, hand light on my shoulder. You did the brave thing, she said. Now we do the boring thing that makes brave stick. We watched the medics load Caleb's very mortal body. He was still alive, bleeding his empire onto a gurney. Vivian, I thought distantly, would hate the color. The android ticked. 2400 hours 19 and 4 seconds. We still have a day, Naomi said. Let's use it to make sure no one unplugs the truth. Cliffhanger. As they wheeled Caleb past, he opened his eyes long enough to fix on me. Say hello to your aunt, he whispered and smiled blood into his teeth. By morning the story stopped being ours alone. Tomas's editor published the deposition clip and a careful summary of what we had. No names of victims, only the machine and its operators. The D stood at a podium and used the word Rico with the relish of someone who had waited years to say it. Reporters dug up Robert Harrow's obituary, and the side door renovations that had followed his fall. Naomi spent the day turning chaos into file numbers. Hanley sang quickly when placed in a room with 2 agents and his own cowardice. He named intermediaries, couriers, the ex-city inspector with the navy suit who had tried to photograph my gallery into compliance. June sat wrapped in a blanket at the station, hands around a mug, voice steady. She didn't apologize again. She didn't need to. Vivian did not appear on camera. She appeared in my living room. My door clicked, my house's scent. A bad mixture of cologne and grief, sharpened into alert. Vivian stepped in without asking, immaculate in charcoal and pearls, eyes bright with a kind of joy that has nothing to do with happiness. Blood will out, she said softly. All these years and still, here you are. Even your anger is family. You confuse inheritance with ownership, I said. Sit down or leave. Saturday, you've hurt the wrong people, she said. We saved lives. Do you think donor lists appear from courage alone? Do you think poor girls make consistent choices without help? Help is not coercion, I said. Saving a life by taking another is not medicine. It's math performed on bodies you don't own. She smiled. You are your mother's mouth. Where is she? I asked. Vivian tilted her head. Gone. Because you made her gone. Because we couldn't risk her making you public at the wrong time, she said gently, like a teacher correcting a child. You were an asset that needed maturation. Look at you now. I stood. I am not an asset, I said, and the part of my voice that belonged to my mother stood with me. Naomi stepped from the hallway, badge visible, recorder blinking. Vivian Harrow, you are under arrest for conspiracy. Vivian didn't bother to run. She looked almost relieved. Tell them to be kind to my orchids, she murmured as she put her hands behind her back. At the station she said nothing else. Her lawyers said too much. The feds smiled politely and filed papers like guillotines. The dead man's switch ticked under 20 hours. Naomi argued to let it fire. A trigger is leverage, she told the DA. Once it goes, there's no jaw to break. At 6 p.m., the prosecutor's office, the Globe, and a federal inbox received the full package: ledgers, videos, maps. We watched the progress bar complete and felt, for the first time, the kind of quiet that isn't afraid. Later, in probate court, a clerk produced a delayed delivery envelope in Ethan's clean hand, to be opened upon resolution of estate fraud claims. The note read, "And after my wife breaks my one rule." I took a breath and slid it open. Cliffhanger: inside lay a deed to Hickory Isle House and a letter that began, "I built a door I asked you not to open. Now it's yours." Ethan's letter was brief. He had learned brevity late and with cost. "My love," it began, "I kept you out because love made me arrogant. I thought I could be the only one to swallow the poison. I built a house that looked like us so I could remember what this fight was for when the files made me forget we were human. I built the nursery because I wanted what we didn't get, and because I hoped that after the fight, there would be a stillness big enough for new noise. I am sorry. If you're reading this, you walked through the door. Keep it open for those who couldn't. The deed was clean, recorded months ago. Time to release if the court tried to reclassify the property as corporate." Ethan had anticipated the harrows at the registry as surely as he had anticipated the storm on our roof. We lit the island house with warm lamps. June stood in the nursery doorway with a slow smile that didn't hide the red around her eyes. "I keep thinking about flour on hands," she said, looking at the quilt. "Your mother baked on Tuesdays. The clinic logs say so. She always took extra prenatal crackers to bring home to a neighbor kid. She wrote a note on a napkin once. For Mara later. I don't know what later was, but I think she tried to send you bread." Tomas, bandaged and sore, limped in carrying a grocery sack like contraband. "I brought a pie," he said, sheepish. It seemed on theme. Naomi stood at the window, phone buzzing with reporters and agents and a husband asking if she was coming home for dinner. "Promotion incoming," she said dryly. "Which is funny because all I did was refuse to drown." Old man Lyle leaned on the porch rail with the proprietary air of a man who believes any good story requires an audience. "Tide owes you a favor," he said into the night. "I'll put it on your tab." We carried the quilt downstairs. I opened the front door, and the house exhaled sea air like truth. I set the quilt over the back of the green couch, exactly where Ethan would have hated it, and Naomi laughed at the blasphemy. The monitors were dark. We had decided to keep them that way unless safety demanded otherwise. A fortress can be a home only if you let it be a house again. In court, Vivian pled not guilty. Caleb survived surgery and pretended not to remember things men remember to save themselves. Hanley made a deal that required him to say the names of 3 men who don't like hearing their names out loud. The foundation shuttered. The clinics reopened under different governance with phrases like trauma-informed, said by people who meant them. As for my mother, the truth came in a small, unceremonious way. A janitor's closet in an old records building. A mislabeled box. A file that had been misfiled by intent. There was a snapshot. A woman in a thrift store coat carrying a bakery box, smile tired, eyes fierce. On the back in looping Spanish, "Par Mara. Cuando estés lista." For Mara. When you are ready. I am not ready. I am willing. I stood on the causeway at low tide and watched the water bow away, revealing the thin, honest path between mainland and island. Ethan used to time his life to this rhythm. I am learning to time mine to something slower, the way anger becomes a tool instead of a home, the way grief becomes a room you visit, not a room you live in. Naomi asked if I wanted to sell the island house. June suggested we turn it into an artist residency for women who need a week to breathe. Tomas wanted to write a book and asked for the house as a backdrop. Lyle offered to install a bell we could ring for dinner. "I'm keeping it," I said. "But I'm leaving the door open." That night, I cracked the nursery window and let the breeze move the paper cranes. I laid Ethan's ring on the sill, not as an altar but as a marker. Here lies a rule we survived. I called the prosecutor and said I would testify. I sent a text to June Tuesday flower. "Your place." She replied, "Bring patience. Mine is out." When the tide turned, the causeway receded like it was bowing. The house listened to the water and the water listened back. A door stayed open. Not because it was safe. Because it was time.